without congressional approval or oversight. The Congress, weakened by toxic partisanship, enabling its own demise as a co-equal branch of government by failing to replace the 2001 authorization for the use of military force and conceding other powers to the executive, all at a time when bipartisan consensus and action are needed to take on America's hardest problems. For most of this period, I was there, as witness, legislator, exhorter, enabler, dissident, and eventually outside advisor and commentator. Before 9/11, I confronted the impact of defense and intelligence cuts on my aerospace-dependent congressional district, and ultimately on America's national security capabilities, in an era where domestic concerns dominated the political agenda. After 9/11, I was a leading congressional voice on intelligence and counterterrorism issues. I had the opportunity to play a role in the Bush administration's efforts to fashion a new security architecture in the years following the attacks. When bipartisan cooperation was still valued, President George W. Bush made a point of cultivating a group of us on the Democratic side. I was invited to high-level meetings, and as the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, that is, the most senior Democrat on the committee, which at the time was controlled by Republicans, received the most classified briefings. I crafted key legislation with Republican counterparts, creating new government structures for homeland security and national intelligence. I also provided bipartisan support for some policies and approaches on detention, surveillance, and military intervention that I later came to regret. After leaving the Congress, I continued to engage on these issues from my perch as president and CEO of the nonpartisan Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. There, I succeeded my friend and mentor, Congressman Lee Hamilton, who co-chaired the 9/11 Commission from what later became my office. As an observer, analyst, and in some cases advisor, I saw the Obama administration attempt to turn the page on the war on terror while continuing with many of the same approaches, if not policies and people, as the Bush-Cheney administration. An escalating drone assassination campaign, a military surge in Afghanistan, and a policy-making approach that, in conjunction with a swollen White House staff, marginalized the administration's own cabinet departments along with the Congress. And despite the rhetoric about ending endless wars, the Trump administration followed roughly the same playbook as its predecessors. More drone strikes and special forces raids, continued use of the detention camp at Guantanamo Bay Naval Base, and more troop deployments and arms sales to support autocrats in the Middle East. The political and strategic entropy is real and cannot be ignored. The reasons are varied and complex, in some cases going back generations. American leaders didn't realize soon enough that the institutions and habits formed during the Cold War were no longer effective in an increasingly multi-power world transformed by digital technology and riven by ethno-sectarian conflict. Nations that became rising centers of economic and political power, freed from the fear of the Soviets, no longer deferred to America as before. Yet we settled into a comfortable, at times arrogant position as the lone superpower or indispensable nation. At the same time, our governing institutions, which had stayed resilient, however imperfectly, through multiple crises, began their own unraveling. Our post-Cold War miscalculations and vulnerabilities were exposed dramatically on September 11, 2001, and have not been fundamentally addressed in the years since. To be sure, I have some great stories to tell, but this is not a typical political memoir or retrospective. Arguably, the time for that book was soon after I left the Congress in 2011, when memories were clearer, passions were hotter, and leading personalities and culprits were still in office. This is a story of people, leaders who strove to do their best under complex circumstances but were too often undermined by personal, ideological, or bureaucratic blind spots. In many respects, it is also a story of institutions, their cultures, their processes, and too often, their inability to adapt from an industrial age analog mindset to our digital world. The U.S. intelligence community I see.